2018 Ford Fusion S model. Replacing the passenger side strut. I already replaced the driver's side strut, so I'm now showing the procedure for the passenger side, which is the exact same as the other side, except of course the strut is 180 the opposite direction, which doesn't really matter as far as how it works. So the top is held on with 3 bolts, here, and 1 under there. All you have to do to get to that one is take those clips off, pull it up. I don't even take this all the way off. I'll show you later, but I'll just hold it up while I put a tool in there, ratchet it loose, and then once all these 3 bolts are out, that's all you have to do up here until you put it back together. Underneath, you have 1 bolt here, that is an 18 millimeter. You need a long socket because a short socket might not work with this bolt sticking out, so you need the long one to be able to fit over the bolt. The 2 biggest bolts are these 2. They're not the same size. This side is a 24 millimeter. This side is a 13/16. Some people say 22 millimeter, but no, it's a 13/16 to be tight, to fit perfectly over the bolt. So you have to take these off. This one you take off, that's a 10 millimeter bolt. It just holds the line when you take it off. Just make sure that you don't let it get snagged on the strut as you're removing it. And then of course putting it back on is just the exact reverse. This one is connected here. You don't want this being bent, so you have to be a little bit careful when you're taking it apart. Alright, so the first step is going to be loosening those bolts up there. So you just remove these 2 clips, lift this up, put the ratchet on using the same hand that you're holding the ratchet on with to hold this up, and then just loosen it. Once that one's loose, the other ones are easier to do because there's nothing in the way. So I can't hold the camera and do that at the same time, so give me a second. Okay, so now that bolt is off. Now we're left with these 2. Now, I obviously have the car jacked up on the normal jack position, but I also have just a regular dinky jack that comes with the car, jacked up underneath here. It's not jacked up any more than the height of the thing. It's right there, just barely putting any pressure on it, just so that it can't drop. The reason you do that is because when you take the bolts out of the top, it will want to drop. So go ahead and have that under there bracing it before you remove the top bolts. Now, go to remove the top bolts. You don't need any major tools to do this. I'm just using a DeWalt impact driver. It's just a basic 20 volt max one, but I'm using one of my better batteries on it. So first one you want to remove is going to be this one, just because you want to get this line out of the way. Make sure it's not connected when anything else comes apart, just in case. So stick it on there. Take the bolt out, set it somewhere where you don't lose it. Now, this piece just moves over like that. So all I want to do is just make sure it's not under this hook, so that it's safe. Now, the next step is going to be removing the big bolts. And again, these bolts, you have a 13/16 for this side and a 24mm for that side. The 24mm for that side needs to be a long socket so that I can get over the bolt and secure on the nut. And it worked perfectly. Take the nut off. You need to save it. You're going to have to reuse it. Now, this also needs to be removed. It holds this line. It's just held in right there, so I won't be able to do it with the camera. But just use some pliers. Be careful when you're pulling it out. You don't want to crimp onto the line or break that off, because it'll need to snap into the new strut. So I can't do it on camera. So hold on and then I'll come back. Okay. So now it's out. It's just this clip. You have to wiggle it a lot. Just be careful about not crimping that. And it just comes out of that hole. Now you just want to let it hang there. This bracket's holding the top of it, which will come off when you get this bolt out, which we won't do until we have that second bolt out from these two. So just put the impact on there. And it's off. That's simple. Put the bolt aside. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. These bolts will be tight because the spring, the shock, the strut, whatever you want to call it, is holding it in place. Not a problem. Just get a hammer and hammer it out. So there's your bolt. If you see the little indents, that's because the bolt has these notches that literally cut into the metal of the strut when you're installing it. So that's why it's tight, trying to come out. Not necessarily because there's any pressure, it's just that it was torqued into position. Now, you gotta be careful about this wire when you're doing this, so I'm gonna remove that one off camera so I can hold the wire out of my way with my other hand. Now that both bolts are out, this is completely loose. It's only being held up by my jack. while it's being held up by the jack, I want to get that one out. So switch to my $18mm socket. Once the nut's off, you have to get it pushed back through this hole. But there's tension on it because of this shock. So we need to let the shock down by going ahead and removing these last two bolts up here. Now, I have that one removed. I have this last one to remove here. I'm not going to record this part because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my drill with this hand to remove that one, and then I'm going to use my other hand to be holding this so it doesn't just drop when the last bolt comes out. Once I have that last bolt out, I'll come down here, get the camera, turn it on, and show you this last step of getting the shock off. So now, this is completely released from the top. I'm going to go ahead and have it braced a little bit right here, on here. I'm going to hold it up while I let this jack down and push this down more to give me more space to work. I'm going to keep the jack under here while I let it down, and then I'll show you the next step. So now it's loose. I'm holding it with just this hand right here. We still have to get this bolt out to the back side, and this bracket that holds the wire. So, easiest way to do that is to actually let the shock come down, turn it sideways a little bit like I have it now, and then pull it out. Just wiggle it back and forth out from the back end while holding the front end with the other hand. Can't do that with the camera, so hold on. And it took me literally 3 seconds to do that. Just holding here with the right hand and pulling from the back on that end with the strut a little bit sideways. Now the strut is completely disconnected from the car. All I have to do is pull it out. Being careful of these wires. So this is the new strut next to the old strut. As you see, the mounting positions are the same, and they usually tell you to save the bolts from the old one when you take it off, but in my case I don't have to because it comes with new bolts. So let's get this put in there. So the only thing I'm reusing from the old shock is the little rubber cap that goes over this nut. That's the only thing I'm reusing. So I've just put in the new strut. I'm resting it on the middle portion of the drive arm, keeping it away from the boot. That's just to hold it up there until I can get up there. So what I'm gonna do is, I can't show it on video because I need both hands. What I'm going to do is I'm going to install all 3 of the bolts on the top, hand tight only, and then do the rest. But to do that, I'm gonna have to use my left hand to hold here to push up in order to get it to line up with the bolts. Once I have those hand tight, I'll come down here and show the mounting process. Okay, so the top 3 bolts are hand tight. Okay, so this one will be last. We're going to line these up with those. So I'm just going to let the jack down. Turn it. Kind of hard with the camera in my hand. See if I can. You need to push this back just a little bit while you're pulling this over, which is a problem because I have one hand holding the camera. But I can line it up, push it in, and now you're gonna have to line these holes up. Yeah, just push down until they line up. Now remember, these bolts are thicker on the end here. This is the inside top. So that's about as far as you're going to be able to get it in, pushing it like that. Now you could hammer it in this side if you wanted to, but there's really no reason to. Using an impact drill, it'll force it in. So just remember, you're going to have to reconnect these things, and then that. So I'll just take this bolt, and it's not, if you see there, it's not completely lined up, so you pull the bottom out just a little bit to line that hole up. Pull out or push in, either way, just to make them line up. Once they're both in there, get your nuts and tie them on. Now here's the tricky bit. Taking these things off is pretty simple. Just unscrew them, right? Well, you do not want to do anything like this on a car and not torque them to the correct specs when you reinstall them. So you got to look up the specs for your car, each part like this, and know your torsion specs. I just used a simple torque wrench. Find the right setting and then torque it. So when I use the impact driver to tighten these, I need to try to stop before I get it too tight. So right when it's flush with the metal here, because when I tighten it on this side is going to pull in and these grooves will cut into the metal. I need to stop before it hits that torque spec. The other ones are simpler just because I'm not having to worry about driving this in first. So remember, this side is a 24. Now, as I tighten it on, you'll see this bolt pull in. it flush, I'll stop there. And then do the same thing to that second bolt. I won't actually torque any of these bolts until I have all of them on. Then I'll torque them all to their individual specs. Second bolt. And it's wanting to spin, so that's where it comes in handy to have the other wrench. So we'll just now we'll just hold this one here, tighten with that one. You already saw the process with this one, so you won't be able to see this one because I need my other hand. Okay, so they're both flush. Now I'll go ahead and reconnect this here. The hose just slots into that there, and then the bolt. So we're just putting that back on, same bolt that came off. That one I'll just tighten all the way down. Doesn't really have a torque spec. Full tight with the impact driver. Hit it one more time. And that would be fine for that one because it doesn't hold any weight. It just serves to hold this hose up. All of the other ones hold weight, and that's the reason why they're important to be torqued correctly. This one will be held up with that bolt once I place it, which is the next step. So, okay, the last mounting step is to mount this bolt on this arm. Now to make it line up, this is where this jack comes into play. Just use it to lift this whole assembly up until it lines up with that bolt. I just use an impact driver to lift the jack. This is the jack that comes with the car. So just get a socket impact driver and we'll lift it up. We'll lift it up. Turn this a little bit to get behind there. Then wiggle it. Just wiggle it to get it in there. So the top bolts I'll torque first. Their factory specs is 25 foot-pounds. So on mine it converts to inches, so I'll be doing about 300 inch-pounds. If you've never used it before, hear that pop? That's when you know you've reached the torque spec. And torque. Do that with the third and you've done the top torque. Just slide your clip back on and you're done up top. The big lower strut bolts specs are 70 foot-pounds of torque. That's about 840 inch-pounds. I'll set my torque wrench and then tighten. The stabilizer nut factory spec torque is 35 foot-pounds. So converting to mine is 420 foot-pounds. I mean, not foot-pounds. 35 foot-pounds converts to 420 inch-pounds, which is what I'm using, the torque wrench I'm using. So that's what I'll set it at. Torque that. Once that's done, the last thing necessary is to take this and insert it in there. And the new strut is completely installed. Last thing to do, slap the tire on and you're done. Hope you enjoyed the video. Didn't have anybody to hold the camera for me, so it's not as good a detail as I would like. I hope I explained everything, but that's pretty much all it is. No big deal, especially using an impact driver. Wasn't hard to get them off at all. Impact drivers are very good at getting bolts off that are stuck, so that's why I use it. And hope you enjoyed the video and hope it helped. Just make sure everything is in the brackets like they're supposed to be.